The Pennsylvania Game Commission has been managing the Commonwealth's wildlife for more than 100 years. Although we're responsible for more than 460 species of wildlife, no other sparks more interest, emotion, and controversy than the white-tailed deer. Hunting and managing deer has changed a lot since these hunters camped in Mifflin County back in 1916. It's doubtful that when most Pennsylvania deer hunters think of deer camp today, they envision camping in tents. Deer management also has changed. A century ago, management focused on increasing deer populations. Today, it focuses on managing the impact deer have on wildlife, forests, and people, primarily through hunting. The white-tailed deer is Pennsylvania's state animal and is found from our wildest forests to our towns and cities and everywhere in between. Our stakeholders, or the people who count on us to manage deer, are also wide-ranging. They include everyone from homeowners in suburbia to farmers in Pennsylvania, from motorists who have close encounters with deer to one of Pennsylvania's nearly 1 million hunters. Can the Game Commission possibly please everybody? In reality, we can't. But we can make every effort to make responsible management decisions to balance deer benefits and impacts for our varied stakeholder groups. The Pennsylvania Game Commission is legally mandated to manage all wild birds and mammals for the benefit of all Pennsylvanians, and management decisions cannot focus only on deer or the interests of a specific stakeholder group. Using direction provided by Pennsylvania's Constitution and the Game and Wildlife Code, the Game Commission developed its mission statement to manage all wild birds, mammals, and their habitat for current and future generations. Now, let's look at the goals of Pennsylvania's deer management program. They help us determine the direction to take when making decisions about deer management. Where do the goals come from? Who decides what they'll be? The public identified the current goals. In 2002, a group representing the interests of sportsmen, agriculture, forestry, environmental conservation, urban-suburban municipalities, the legislature, and the Game Commission participated. The goals of the 2003-2007 Deer Management Plan included manage deer for healthy deer, manage deer for healthy forest habitat, manage deer for reduced deer-human conflicts. In 2007, the Game Commission started holding open houses across the state where the public was invited to provide comment on current and future deer management goals. As a result, 2 goals were added to the 2008-2017 Deer Management Plan. They are manage deer to provide recreational opportunities and improve the public's knowledge and understanding of deer and the deer management program. Once our goals were identified, we had to sort out how to accomplish them. For instance, how can we determine if deer are healthy? At what point will a forest no longer be able to replace itself? Are people having high levels of conflict with deer, or are their interactions reasonable and rewarding? Are we managing deer to provide optimum recreational opportunities that are compatible with other management goals? Are we doing an adequate job of informing the public and instilling understanding about the deer management program? Let's take a look at each goal and how it's measured. Research has shown that a deer's population health can be measured through reproduction. Female deer in good physical condition produce more fawns than those in poor physical condition. Deer health varies across the state, so to assess deer health for each wildlife management unit, agency personnel collect reproductive data from female deer killed on highways. Adult females, after all, produce the greatest number of offspring and have the greatest effect on the population. Our second deer management goal focuses on habitat. Once a seemingly endless forest, Pennsylvania's landscape has changed repeatedly from decade to decade to accommodate the development of everything from farms and towns to industrial parks and roads. But forests have always been important to Pennsylvanians, and white-tailed deer must be managed properly to ensure woodlands remain healthy and capable of supporting their diverse ecosystems. White-tailed deer are a natural and vital part of forests. They are a keystone species, one that can have a dominating influence on the composition of a forest community. Beavers, another keystone species, cause a shift in the character of the habitat by essentially destroying one type of habitat and creating another. However, deer are considered a keystone species because they can alter a forest ecosystem. A mismanaged deer population devours whatever vegetation it can reach and creates an ecological desert from the forest floor to 6 feet above it. When deer overbrowse an area, nothing replaces what was taken. There's a void. Unlike most other wildlife species, whitetails directly influence the quality of the habitat where they live because they consume their habitat. For example, when deer eat all the young trees growing on the forest floor, there will be no young trees to replace old ones when they die, are blown down, or are removed. If this occurs, a forest cannot regenerate its current composition, and wildlife that depends on that special mix of trees consequently faces greater, sometimes insurmountable difficulties meeting its nutritional and other habitat requirements. The relationship between deer and forest is well documented in wildlife management and upheld by observations of Pennsylvanians. Deer without trees are like fish out of water. Hunters, our most vocal constituents, agree habitat is important. In surveys, a majority of deer hunters agreed that deer affect plants and animals. 9 out of 10 hunters also agree deer populations should be balanced with natural food supplies, and that managing game to promote healthy habitat for all wildlife should be an extremely or a very important consideration in wildlife management. Hunters, stakeholder groups, and the Game Commission agree that managing deer to promote a healthy forest habitat is important. But what is a healthy forest? Forest regeneration, or the presence of young seedlings and sapling trees, was chosen as the primary indicator of forest habitat health because a healthy forest has enough young seedlings and sapling trees to replace the larger trees when they die, fall down, or are cut. But deer clearly are not the only factor that influences forest regeneration. Others, such as light conditions, seed supply, soil chemistry, diseases, forest pests, and fire suppression, also influence the health of any forest and its individual tree species. The Game Commission evaluates habitat health by monitoring the regeneration of select tree species through data collected annually by the U.S. Forest Service, Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and Penn State University. Oaks, maples, hemlock, beech, and other species are used as the primary measurement of forest health because they make up the majority of the trees in Pennsylvania's forests. Information comes only from plots that receive enough light for regeneration. Results also include a variety of trees to ensure that one species' problems, like the troubles gypsy moth caterpillars cause for oaks, will not bias the overall measure. These characteristics make the plots ideal for measuring the impact of deer browsing on forest regeneration and ultimately changes in deer population and distribution. Just as we saw with deer health, forest habitat health varies across the state. Pennsylvanians and deer interact countless times daily. Will the farmer who planted his cornfield be upset over the loss of crops to deer, or tolerate it as part of making a living outdoors? Or will he admire the animals, be grateful for their presence, and hope to see them again in hunting season? The answer varies from individual to individual, but illustrates immediately that perceptions about deer differ, sometimes greatly. White-tailed deer are a valuable part of Pennsylvania's natural heritage. They create excitement for hikers and wildlife watchers, provide recreation for nearly 1 million hunters, as well as millions of pounds of venison for successful hunters and food banks, help raise millions of dollars annually to support wildlife conservation efforts, and stimulate about $1 billion in economic benefit for sporting goods stores, butcher shops, and other businesses statewide. Deer, however, also have negative impacts, and deer-human conflicts must be an important consideration in managing deer populations. Colliding with a deer on a highway can total your vehicle instantly, as well as cause serious injury, even death. Millions of dollars are lost annually in forest regeneration losses and damages to agricultural crops. Countless suburbanites are tired of deer consuming their expensive ornamental shrubbery. Finding a balance between a deer population's benefits and negative impacts is a constant challenge because it's based on our personal values and perceptions. What is a problem to some people isn't even a consideration to others. That's why establishing what is an acceptable level of deer-human conflict in a wildlife management unit is not as straightforward as the previously mentioned measures of deer and forest habitat health. In 2006, the Game Commission began implementing citizen advisory committees in selected wildlife management units as a way to gauge the level of deer-human conflict. These committees consist of various stakeholder groups, including hunters, farmers, foresters, and business and homeowners. They are all people who have an interest in or are affected by deer management. All Citizen Advisory Committee members are asked to seek opinions from the groups they represent. Their job is to resolve their differences about the deer population in their wildlife management unit and provide a consensus recommendation to Game Commission staff to increase, decrease, or stabilize population for the next 5 years by a specific percentage. For example, a 10% increase would cause a slight increase in the deer population. The percentage gauges how far the committee believes the current deer population is from where they think it should be. While this recommendation is an important component of deer management, it will not cause changes in deer population beyond what is acceptable within the prescribed deer and forest health measures. That's why the agency must take into account deer and forest health measures while making deer management decisions. The fourth goal is to manage deer to provide for recreational opportunities. The Game Commission is committed to our hunting heritage. Maintaining and expanding recreation by providing hunting opportunities is one way to continue this rich heritage in our state. But any additional opportunities considered must be compatible with other deer management goals. Hunters must recognize that increased opportunity may or may not increase their personal time or success afield. The management of our state animal is a complex task with many different facets. Helping people understand how and why we manage deer the way that we do is as important as properly managing the resource. Therefore, the fifth goal is to improve the public's knowledge and understanding of deer and the deer management program. The Game Commission is committed to helping Pennsylvanians better understand deer and their management through a host of educational tools. By using survey techniques, we can measure our success and incorporate public input into future educational efforts. Now, let's review the deer program's goals and measures. The Game Commission manages deer because its mission is to manage all wild birds, mammals, and their habitats for current and future generations. Deer management goals are identified by the public and adopted by the Commission. Measures are used to define and assess progress towards the goals. They are based on sound science, time-proven, and have been reviewed by professionals outside the Game Commission. Okay, now let's look at some recent changes to Pennsylvania's deer management program. For decades, the Game Commission based its deer management objectives on deer densities, specifically the number of deer per forested square mile. Yet, we just covered the goals of our current deer program and their measures and didn't even mention deer densities. Assigning a deer density to an area based only on the age of its forest land, which is what Pennsylvania did for decades, cannot fully take into account deer impacts on themselves, the forest, and the people. In addition, our old system was updated with new habitat information only once every 10 years. The change from deer densities to health and conflict measures was made to take advantage of more timely and better information for managing deer that improved our understanding of what was happening afield. It was a necessary step forward for deer management, one that now allows managers to better monitor deer health and stay abreast of the whitetail's influence on its world and ours. Critics of the current deer management program view the change from deer densities to quantifiable measures and deer population trends as less credible. They want to know how many deer there are in Pennsylvania. And when the Game Commission doesn't provide an answer, these individuals question how the agency can possibly have the information it needs to manage deer. Well, the agency has never really known exactly how many deer there are in Pennsylvania. And even if it did, that total would be different in 10 minutes because whitetails are free-ranging, mistake-making animals that die regularly from mortality factors that include everything from disease, predators, and vehicles to people who shoot them while hunting, protecting crops, or breaking the law. We cannot census the deer population. We measure the harvest and use the scientific process to estimate what was there and what reproduction will bring. Just how important are deer population estimates to a deer management program? A well-respected wildlife biologist and statistician named Donald Haynes said, quote, Estimates of whitetail population size interest the public and appeal to the media. Often, however, the importance of knowing the population size is overestimated as a tool for deer management. It is more important to know the relative abundance of deer, whether the population is increasing or decreasing, and whether it is above, below, or nearly in balance with the carrying capacity of the environment.
The idea of knowing the trend of a deer population and the balance of that deer population with habitat and people is not unique to our deer program. It's an idea that's been around for decades. Instead of focusing on whether there are 20 or 30 deer per square mile, the Game Commission now monitors whether the deer population is increasing, decreasing, or stable. And our deer management decisions are based on deer impacts on themselves, the forest, and people, not on a single number. If the forest is healthy, the deer are healthy, and people are tolerant of the level of deer-human conflicts, then it doesn't matter to us if there's 20 or 30 deer per square mile. What matters most is the goals of our deer program have been met.
The Game Commission monitors deer population trends by using antlered harvests, antlerless deer hunter success, and population indices based on a sex-age-kill procedure. Data sets used to monitor our deer populations include tens of thousands of hunter-killed deer that are examined by Game Commission personnel each hunting season, and deer harvest report cards provided by deer hunters. In addition to deer harvest information, data from Game Commission field studies involving nearly 1,000 individually marked deer are used. Despite the large quantities of data involved, none of the methods used alone would be perfect. For this reason, we use multiple methods to monitor deer population trends. Analyzing antlered harvest and antlerless hunter success trends is relatively simple. In each case, an increasing trend in antlered harvest or antlerless deer hunter success rates suggests an increasing deer population trend. However, 1 year does not make a trend. Any assessment of deer population trend must include at least 3 to 5 years of data. The sex-age-kill procedure for monitoring deer population trends, another proven technique, is based on sophisticated equations and requires computer analysis to process all the data entered. This procedure was developed in 1960 and has been used for decades by states with deer populations comparable to Pennsylvania, such as Michigan and Wisconsin. In 2005, the Game Commission and the Pennsylvania Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit at Penn State University modified a sex-age-kill procedure to monitor Pennsylvania's deer population trends in each wildlife management unit. The new approach was employed in Pennsylvania and also reviewed by biologists and statisticians from across the country. While the appraisals were positive, reviewers did provide suggestions to improve Pennsylvania's procedure. Based on those reviews, the Game Commission continues to strengthen its population trend monitoring methods through research and data analysis. With more data and experience using our deer population monitoring methods, we will continue to refine our methods and provide the most reliable deer population trend assessments available. The most important annual deer management decision the Game Commission makes involves setting hunting seasons and bag limits. For decades, the Game Commission used a 2-week antlered deer season, followed by a 2- or 3-day antlerless deer season to manage deer. While this approach was agreeable to most hunters, it was unreliable to deer managers, because weather and hunter availability during a short antlerless season were often unpredictable and sometimes left management efforts to reduce deer numbers short of the mark. For example, bad weather on the opening day of a 3-day antlerless season could reduce substantially the overall antlerless harvest. That would lead to a higher deer population the following year. In the late 1990s, Pennsylvania's overall deer population rose annually. Deer were placing an unacceptable burden on the habitat that they share with other wildlife, on themselves, and on people. Expanding hunting opportunities for antlerless deer seemed the best way to tackle the growing population. In 2001, the Game Commission went to a 2-week concurrent antlered and antlerless firearms season. The move created a more stable foundation for Pennsylvania's deer management program by reducing the impacts of unfavorable weather and giving hunters more time and flexibility to hunt. It also created a more effective way to manage deer. Today, deer managers can better predict the outcome of an antlerless hunting season and reduce the risk of an over- or underharvest of antlerless deer. Although some hunters say longer seasons have led to overharvest of antlerless deer, the bottom line is that the number of licenses sold, not the season length, controls the size of our antlerless deer harvest. Deer hunting has always been and remains our most important management tool for adjusting the size of deer populations. So deer harvest estimates must be reliable to accurately measure the effect that hunting has on the whitetail population. Every year, the Game Commission commits both money and manpower to collect data from tens of thousands of hunter-killed deer, capture information from more than 100,000 successful deer hunters, and to estimate deer harvests. Despite this colossal effort, the result still is an estimate of the total harvest. To achieve a complete harvest count, all successful deer hunters would have to report their harvest to the Game Commission. Although the Game Commission provides postage-paid harvest report cards and the law requires successful hunters to submit them, only about 4 in 10 successful hunters do. Until 100% of all successful hunters accurately report their deer harvests, the Game Commission must continue to estimate the total deer harvest. The Game Commission uses a common wildlife management technique to estimate the deer harvest. It is a simple yet powerful method of estimating wildlife populations and, in our case, deer harvests. Our data collection and harvest estimate methods passed an independent scientific review and was published in the Journal of Wildlife Management in October of 2004. When the Game Commission estimates a deer harvest, it starts by determining the number of deer killed and reported by hunters on deer harvest report cards, and the number of deer examined by Game Commission deer aging teams, which check about 30,000 hunter-killed deer annually. With this data, the Game Commission can estimate the deer harvest. Although the Game Commission's method of estimating deer harvests is sound, both scientifically and statistically, it is not immune to criticism. Some people think it takes the Game Commission too long to release its final deer harvest estimates. Others believe that some states do a better job of reporting deer harvests. Let's take a closer look at these two concerns. First, why does it take us so long to estimate the deer harvest? The short answer is because there is a tremendous amount of work that must take place after all deer seasons have concluded. What work? Well, just follow along. Deer hunting doesn't stop in Pennsylvania until the end of January. Hunters have 10 days to mail their report cards after the harvest of a deer. Then, add the first 2 weeks of February to the timetable to allow for those report cards to reach us. Over the last 2 weeks of February, data for more than 100,000 report cards is entered, harvest data is validated, and data entry errors are identified and corrected. During the first 2 weeks of March, harvest results are analyzed and estimated, and the information is incorporated in a news release that is circulated to the public. The deer harvest estimate is then used to help shape our antlerless deer license allocations for the following license year and to determine if we need to make adjustments to any deer season and bag limit recommendations. Okay, now let's look at the suggestion that other states have better methods of estimating deer harvest than Pennsylvania. The Commission regularly hears from people who want us to use deer check stations and surveys of hunters when they purchase a hunting license. Let's look at each briefly. The Game Commission has not implemented check stations because they would provide an incomplete count of the harvest, just like report cards do now, and they would result in greater costs and unnecessary inconveniences to hunters. Under the current system, hunters only need to complete a postage-paid postcard and drop it in the mail to report a deer harvest. This takes less than 5 minutes. Given the history of check stations in states that use them, hunter compliance would remain considerably less than 100%. So in the end, the total deer harvest would still have to be estimated, and without the aid of the reporting rates currently used by the Game Commission. That's not an improvement, it's a step backwards. Using harvest report cards provides the same information as check stations, costs less, and is more convenient than check stations. Hunters just need to remember to mail the report cards when they shoot a deer. Okay, if check stations are not an improvement, what about surveying all hunters when they buy a new hunting license? Although we could survey hunters about how many deer they harvested last season, this method, like check stations, would not be an improvement over the current system, largely because the harvest information would not be collected soon enough to help establish antlerless deer license allocations. The Game Commission recognizes its responsibility to manage deer populations. We use proven procedures that provide the most reliable data for making management recommendations. The agency evaluates its methods regularly and investigates all practical alternatives. Many deer hunters base their hunting satisfaction on the number of deer they see or shoot. Hunters who see more deer generally are more satisfied with the deer management program. Some hunters say they aren't satisfied with the number of deer they're seeing afield. They say there are too few. In 2002, the Game Commission began increasing antlerless license allocations to address the serious problem of too many deer. The increase in licenses had the intended effect. While it was not popular with everyone, efforts to reduce the number of deer in many of the state's 22 wildlife management units were necessary, well publicized, and the responsible thing to do. Deer populations were reduced to achieve deer population goals identified by the public, and as a result, many hunters saw fewer deer. But other factors, such as weather, deer food, range conditions, and deer behavior, all affect deer movements and the number of deer seen by hunters. Any one or a combination of these other factors can contribute to the number of deer hunters see afield. If there's one point hunters have made repeatedly to Game Commission personnel across the state, it is, quote, "We don't like the lower deer populations, but we like antler restrictions." Antler restrictions were put in place to protect yearling bucks from harvest and to increase the number of older bucks in the harvest. Based on field studies and harvest data, antler restrictions have accomplished both objectives. Our data show that yearling bucks are being protected from harvest, and hunters are harvesting more adult bucks than they did a few years ago when deer populations were higher. When antler restrictions were implemented, some hunters questioned whether antler restrictions would hurt our deer herd's genetics. Such repercussions, however, were unlikely to occur. New research indicates white-tailed deer breeding behavior is not dominated by a few adult bucks. Rather, most or all bucks in a population, including yearling bucks, will participate in breeding does. And because most of the bucks harvested under Pennsylvania antler restrictions are harvested after the peak of the rut, when most bucks pass on their genes, the potential negative effect of antler restrictions on genetics is further reduced. Yearling bucks harvested in early December probably pass their genes on to the next generation. And the big bucks harvested in early October archery season more than likely pass their genes on to future generations as younger bucks. Remember, too, that does contribute genes to every buck, and hunters are not selecting for or against inferior or superior does. Many necessary changes have occurred in Pennsylvania's deer program in recent years. While these changes have altered some hunting traditions, all have been done for the benefit of deer, other wildlife, habitat, and Pennsylvanians. It is common to hear the word customer when referring to deer hunters in debates over deer management. This brings with it an attitude that the customer is always right, and you work for me. While some view it as a right granted by their purchase of a hunting license, it has limitations. Just as a restaurant owner will accommodate customer requests, a responsible owner will draw the line when customer demands or actions undermine the owner's ability to make a living or have an adverse impact on other customers. Similarly, the Game Commission must balance the desires of the deer hunters with the desires and needs of all Pennsylvanians, other wildlife, and habitat. While deer hunting in Pennsylvania provides a substantial boost to many local economies, deer management is not a business. Rather than customers, we consider deer hunters partners in deer management. Partners work together to reach common goals. Through this partnership, the Game Commission and hunters carry out essential management actions. Hunters enjoy the benefits of outdoor recreation, time spent afield with family and friends, and the venison that hunting provides. The Game Commission values the support it receives and the partnership it has with hunting organizations in the state. Although complete agreement by all stakeholders on how to manage deer is unlikely, a greater understanding of the Game Commission's duties, responsibilities, and motivations will hopefully ensure a better relationship between the stakeholder and the agency for the benefit of the Commonwealth's wildlife resources. As Aldo Leopold said in 1933, quote, "If we see the issue as a mutual problem confronting not only hunters, but also farmers, landowners, and protectionists, and solvable by their mutual cooperation, then a brighter outcome may be anticipated." We hope you found this presentation informative and educational. For more details on the Game Commission's Deer Management Program, please visit our website at www.pgc.state.pa.us.